Welcome everybody to today's episode of Quirky Inspirations. I have the absolute joy of introducing you to Nicole Wittauer, who is presently sitting in Switzerland. Now, Nicole has one of those, how do you describe it? Je ne sais quoi type jobs, passions. It's difficult to put her in a box. I don't believe in boxes anyway, but you try and put Nicole in a box and I guarantee you she'll break out. So, Nicole, would you tell us a bit more about what you do? Because you're going to describe it far better than I can.
Oh, I love the way you introduced me. Thank you. That's lovely. Who am I? What do I do? I have one key word that I, go to, and the word is play. I have finally, in my 56 years on this planet, come back to embracing play. After a long detour of trying to figure out my purpose, trying to find my way, trying to find meaning in my life, trying to, make sense of it all. And I kind of came to the conclusion that the whole path, the whole journey, all these trials and errors of trying to see who I was brought me to where I'm now, which is to embrace play as a way of life, as a meaning of life, as a way of connecting. And so I take people on journeys of rediscovering who they are, rediscovering who they were initially, before we put all this baggage on us, before we had all the, the to-do list and the boxes to tick, and just reconnect with something more aligned, more playful, to themselves, to others, to life, to the world. And it's a very, very powerful thing. And I love doing it. And yes, that's my box. It's a play box.
Love it. The concept of play, we tend to associate it with little people. And as you say, when we're small and we're exploring the world and everything's new and exciting and let me at it. And then over time, that kind of gets squashed out of us. So what does play look like in adult world?
Well, play in adult world looks very similar to play, or I'm trying to help people reconnect to the play of the child world, because it's an extremely powerful tool. That's why nature gave it to us, right? I mean, you look at the animal kingdom, you look at look at humans. Play is the tool we were given naturally to explore, to discover life, to understand how things work, right? Mm-hmm. But the difference between play and following one's purpose or finding work or whatever is that when we're in play, we're exploring without expectations, right? We don't know what we're going to find. We are just playing to discover.
Right.
When we've reached that age of, the late teens, when our parents start saying it's time to move into the real world, it's not playtime anymore. You need to find a job, you need to find a purpose, you need to find, a calling or whatever, so that you can one day be happy, try to do studies that make you feel good. And it's almost like, oh, am I not happy now? I need to work at being happy. I need to work at, And so all of a sudden, everything has an expectation, the expectation to make money, the expectation to have a certain status potentially, and, in certain, within certain families or certain areas. So all of a sudden, everything has become not only serious, but risky, right? Because when there's expectations, there's the potential of failing. There is, right? And so when we are afraid to fail, well, we take a lot less risks, which means we don't explore in the same way. We want to be sure that we're going to succeed. When we're children, we don't care whether we succeed or not. You put a child in front of a tree because I'm going to climb this thing, right? Let me see how I can climb it. Yeah. If there are no branches low enough for it to reach it, it's not going to sit there and say, oh my God, I failed. And, it's going to go looking for another tree or something else to climb. It's not going to think twice about it. And this is sort of the journey that I try to bring people back to, is that exploration without expectation. Because when we go and explore these things as adults, we open doors that we don't dare to open otherwise. And because we're in a safe space, in a safe environment of play, because we are, if you like, in that box, but it's not a box, a rigid box. It's a play. It's a sandbox. It's a sandbox of toys. We can try things out, and if they don't work, it's okay, because we've let our mind explore them. We've allowed ourselves. We've given ourselves permission to explore ideas that we would otherwise not allow ourselves to explore because limiting beliefs, blah, 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 judgment, expectations, all get in the way and say, well, there's no point even thinking about that because that's not going to work.
Yeah.
No, let's go there. Let's go there. Let's fly. Let's just see what happens. And then all of a sudden, that's where we find all sorts of amazing stuff.
I find it really interesting. My background is in speech pathology, and studying child development. Obviously, we tracked normally developing children, and you can see that look of joy and glee. You go, oh, something new. Let's try it. And after we reach a certain age, something new, a potential to fail. As you were saying, it's the expectation that once we get beyond a certain age, of course we know how to do it. And it doesn't matter that we've never done it before. If we don't do it right first time, we're a failure. And for me, what I'm hearing you say is that you're providing a safe environment, a safe sandbox in which to go, you stuff it. I don't care whether I fail or not, because I feel safe. And I think that's that safety thing. I'm putting words in your mouth here. Do you find that safety is an issue for a lot of adults?
I think the outside world sort of, doesn't feel safe to a lot of people.
True.
I think we spend a lot of time and energy protecting ourselves. And therefore not being ourselves, because when we are ourselves, we get hurt because we've gotten hurt in the past and we remember that pain. And so we try to morph into what feels safer, which means which will create less reactions, which will create less criticism, which will, so not only don't we feel safe, we've reduced ourselves to an image that we feel we need to portray in order to be accepted. This whole thing about acceptance, right? We are social people. We are not meant to live on our own as hermits. And so I think there's a very deep sense of within us from within the survival mechanism, which is to be accepted by the tribe. Because if we are not accepted by the tribe and we are removed from the tribe, we are in danger, right? Isolated, we are in danger of being eaten or killed or whatever. And so this very old and innate, reptilian sense of belonging, it's very, very deep. And so when we feel when we're children that, oh, that's not acceptable, that behavior, not in this house, not in this room, not in this school, there are flags of saying, ooh, if I don't behave in ways that I can be accepted, I risk being rejected, isolated, removed from the tribe on my own, and therefore risking my life in that deep, subconscious mind. So the unfortunate thing is, yes, we spend our childhood years trying to adapt, trying to figure out how to best behave in order to survive, to not be yelled at, to not be scolded, and in some unfortunate cases, not to be physically hurt, And so we create this persona that we end up identifying with and becoming, to the point where we don't actually remember who we were initially, and we don't really know who we are. And then we're sort of living a life that doesn't feel like it's our own, sort of out of alignment. We feel that nothing feels right. We don't know why. And it can go very, very deep. So for me, play is a tool for healing. It is a tool for reconnecting to who we were, to who we're meant to be, to what feels like home. It is a reconnection to our inner home.
Yeah. So what does play, when you work with people, how does that play manifest? Give us a couple of examples, maybe a case study or something, so we've got a bit of an idea as to how that play works as an adult.
Well, it's interesting because it manifests internally, but it also manifests externally. Because I discovered sort of the spiritual world 4 or 5 years ago, and how energies work also around us. And I noticed that actually, there is a action, reaction, interaction thing going on. And we know this between people, right? We feel energies. You can be walking into a room and everybody's got their back turned and you don't even see their faces, and you feel, ooh, the energy in this room is, right? So we are energetic beings, and we know this by now, that everything is energy. And so there is this interaction with the outside world, and discovering that actually the universe, or however you want to call it, this outside world, is actually an energy of play. Which means that when we go into the outside world with the playful energy, the outside world reacts through play. And it presents us with things, with answers, with ideas, with messages in a way that are very, very playful. And so, and the more we are in alignment with ourselves, the more we are in that playful mode, the more we see these things appearing. We call them synchronicities. And so, you asked me, how does that present itself? How does it, well, when we get to that stage of being really within play, synchronicities appear all the time. All the time. And it just becomes, all you can do is walk around and smile. I mean, just to give you an idea, the other day I went, what was it, yesterday, Sunday, I went for a walk with my boyfriend, and we were talking about, my son had talked about falcons, because we'd seen a bird and it was hovering, and we have a lot of buzzards around here. And he said, oh, but that must be a falcon, because buzzards, they don't hover. And I said, oh, well, what does a falcon look like? I don't know what a falcon looks like. And as I was asking the question by boyfriend, I said, I wonder what a falcon looks like. We were walking in the fields, and there was this sign, by the farmers, and he goes over to look at the sign. He says, you're going to come and have a look at this. And there were 3 pictures of the local, fauna and one bird. We have lots of birds. We have many, many birds, but the one bird that was on the sign was a falcon. And there was a picture of it, and they were just, oh, okay, here's the answer, right? And it's just weird. There's no explanation, but you sort of start seeing.
I delivered.
Yeah, it's sort of like, and it's just when you really sort of get into that space, you start seeing things everywhere. And of course it's hard to explain, but it's just a lot of fun when you start seeing things and seeing them as an interaction. Don't know, that sign's been there forever. I've never seen it. Why did we walk over there at that point? I have no clue. But it makes it fun. It doesn't matter if it's real or not. It just seems to happen.
And as you say, it's fun. And isn't it? Life is so much lighter if you're not carrying around that, life is hard, it's got to be hard work, and you shrink and you get smaller and smaller, whereas
and all you see in that moment is how hard life is, and you don't see everything that's going on around. And you can learn and discover things, anything from anything. You can just look at something, say, okay, what can I learn from the shape of the roof in the house? And you can go on some kind of a playful spree and just sort of say, well, there's this and that's higher than that, and oh, it kind of reminds me of my life right now of this and that, and you can learn anything from anything when you are in a playful mode.
Free flow exploration, isn't it?
Free flow
As you
exploration.
say, exploration without expectation.
Yeah.
Because we're often go on.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, 'cause we're often sort of focused. The world teaches us to focus. And another, yes, it's important that we do focus, but another name for focus is blinders.
Yeah.
And you then don't see what's in your peripheral vision. You don't see the possibilities out here. And it's very often from out here that those curveballs come in because we didn't see them coming.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We live in a society which is very goal oriented, right?
Yes.
And so it says you need to have a goal, you need to know where you're going. Otherwise, how do you know, there's a lovely word called cottywomple. And it pretty much says going towards an undefined goal, but with a defined pace in a way, sort of like, how you're walking, but don't know where you're walking to. So,
What was the word?
Cottywomple.
Cottywomple.
Yes, it's a lovely word.
Ooh.
It's an old word. It's a cottywomple.
Tell you what, we'll do a definition in the show notes.
Yeah.
I mean, I love words. And
oh yeah,
I'm listening like, sound of that one. Got to do a little bit of etymology on that.
This is going to be your new favorite word, cottywomple.
Cottywomple.
Yeah. And so it's true that when we are, told to focus on your goal, this was always my problem. Is that, I need a goal. I don't know what my goal is. I don't have a goal. Oh my God, I can't even come up with a goal. And immediately it's sort of, self-judgment and shame. And if I don't have a goal, how am I going to get there?
Shrink, yeah.
And what I've realized, and a lot in the coaching world, it's also all about define the pain point, of the person who who you're serving and what they're going to get, what goal they will have reached when they're. And for me, it wasn't, well, we explore and we find the treasures and, but I can't tell them what they're going to find, And what we do with this whole goal-oriented thing is we forget about the journey. We're constantly focusing on the end result. And very often when we get to the end result, if we get there, it feels empty. It's like, oh, now I have this. So now what? But when you say, okay, I'm going to cottywomple, I'm going in some kind of a direction, which seems kind of, for the moment, seems fun, but I'm going to keep looking left and right just because, it's the scenic route. You can take the motorway and be bored to death and spend hours and hours on the motorway. And then, you might like what you get when you find when you get there, and you may not. Or I'm going to take the scenic route and I'm going to explore what's going on. And then we'll get there when we get there, if we get there. And maybe while we're on the scenic route, we're going to find a path that looks so much more exciting than where we were planning to go. And that's fun. That's, but we'd never see all these things if we didn't take the time to explore the journey. And so I was, like that, fixated on the fact that I couldn't find a goal, and I needed a goal, and I needed a purpose. And I realized that everything that I'd been living, it all contributed. Everything had a point. It didn't make sense while I was there. I felt like I was doing 50 different things, started this, stopped that, started this, stopped that, and it's only with time that I realized each one of those things served a purpose. There's not one thing that happened in my life that wasn't useful. But to acknowledge that as you're going through it makes the journey so much more fun and just, you're just in a state of acceptance and calm and
self, isn't it?
You let go of that unworthiness of that judgment. You say, oh, okay, so this is interesting, this is fun. It's not always fun, sometimes it's hard, but knowing that this is part of it, this is it's going to serve you, this is useful.
And chances are it's not just going to serve you. you're going to be able to use it to serve other people.
Exactly.
And that's why that's what I've learned in my journey, that some pretty shitty stuff's happened. And at the time it didn't feel good. And yet now, as you say, looking back on it, you go, okay, that wasn't just for me. That was for other people as well. And it gives them that sense of it was worth it.
Absolutely.
Worth it.
Absolutely. And sometimes it's also about revisiting, this is I went through this exercise this last year of writing this book, and and I was looking for stories to accompany the pictures that I was drawing, and revisiting these stories and remembering sort of how I left them. Sort of, you have an experience and then there's a sensory outcome, right? Either you liked it, you didn't like it, it was tough, you felt ashamed, or you hated somebody, or whatever, yourself. And then you kind of brush it under the carpet and try to move on. And by going through this exercise of finding all these stories, I revisited them stories, but I also revisited the outcome, sort of that feeling I was left with. And then I sort of thought, but is that what I still feel? Or is that what I still want to feel? Is that how I still want to see this thing? Because of course, at the time, I'm talking about stories that could be 30, 40 years back, right? At the time, I didn't have the presence of mind of saying, okay, what do I want to take away from this experience? It was sort of like, I got lost. And my
I don't really think about that sort of thing, isn't it?
It was sort of like, okay, I survived. Now I can move on. I don't want to think about it anymore. But, with the hindsight, thinking, okay, what is left of that? And have I taken everything I could from it in terms of the learning?
Squeeze the juice out of it.
Yeah. Let's go see if there's any, good stuff left in there that I never really went and got. And so going through that exploration and remodeling sort of the sensory outcome was so interesting, because it allowed me to shift the way I felt about the experience. And so something that might have left a bad taste in my mouth, now I see, oh, that was so useful. But if we don't go and revisit that at some stage, then it just stays that way. And it's just one of those things that we're like, okay, let's
brush it off. Yeah, move on.
Move on.
You mentioned this in relation to a book. Tell us more about this book, because the audience don't know about the book. You've told me about it, but yeah, tell our audience about this wonderful book that you're working on. Almost about, well, by the time this goes live, you will have published it.
Yeah, it is finished. It is published. It's just not on this Amazon just yet, but hopefully it will be by the time this is published. So this was an interesting experience, because I've been wanting to write a book, but a self-help book for years, for people to be able to go through some form of a coaching process without a coach, but like an activity book where you doodle and you draw and you not a writing book where you're answering questions and it feels like homework, but something that's very creative and you sort of get to know yourself through creativity. And so it's taken many different shapes and forms in my mind, and finally came to the point where, okay, maybe make this really simple, make it a coloring book, but a coloring book with purpose and with things you learn and sort of you explore your mind and questions and so forth. And every time I would draw these images for the book, and then I'd looked at them afterwards, I thought, oh, no, this doesn't work. This doesn't work. There's too much of me in there. It was like there are messages for me in there. They don't concern everybody. It needs to be more generic. But by the fifth or sixth image that I tried drawing, and I kept popping up and messages to me kept popping up. I thought, okay, maybe this book isn't supposed to be about the person. Maybe it is supposed to be a little bit about me. Okay, and that was a hard thing to overcome, because as a coach, it's never supposed to be about you, right? You're always supposed to be, it's only about the person, your stories don't matter. And I thought, well, I keep popping up. So let's just go there for a while. Let's explore. And so I allowed myself to come up in these images. And what I discovered was that, well, I'd already known it before, but what came more clear was that there's a real connection between the hand and the subconscious mind. And if you allow that flow to happen, then, you can go on a journey in your mind and come back with a postcard. Like that's how it felt to me. It's like,
Mhm.
oh, okay, so this is where I went, and oh, this is interesting. So I really allowed myself for that process to happen. I created these coloring maps, coloring images on different themes, and decided then to bring stories in with each theme. So
Nice.
there's a coloring image, which might be about, for example, talents. We're exploring talents, the concept of talents, and that, and then a story that's somehow related from my childhood or whatever.
Mhm.
But the whole process, to explore that was really quite healing for me,
Yes.
and it wasn't meant to be. And again, this is where I say,
You
when
didn't
you're
have
in
any
that
expectations.
yeah, but when you play with it, and that's what I just
No.
decided to play with it, then you start getting answers, in different forms that you don't expect. And so these answers came up. Now, of course, at the end of the book, I thought, yeah, okay, so this was interesting and healing for me, but why should I publish? How does it serve anybody? Like, what's the point now? And I remembered that a story in particular, but that sometimes you do things for yourself, and you have no intention of helping anybody else. You're just, looking out for yourself, and somebody comes to you and says, seeing what you did has inspired me, because I realized that, this, that, and the other for myself. And so that's what brought me to say, no, yeah, go ahead, you can publish this. You never know how it might serve someone. Your own exploration of your own self might be useful for someone else, and it's not your job to know how.
True.
It's not my job to know how my journey inspires others. And so it's been a really, really fun and interesting process. And yes, it's called Stumbling Upon Myself, because I really did kind of stumble. Kept getting in the way, so I kept stumbling, and there we have it. And hopefully it will help other people, explore certain topics in their own way, and bring up, ideas for them.
Well, I mean, the power of story, and the fact that you've included a personal example. It's almost like lived experience. You show people by example, you model for other people. Absolutely, I can hear what you're saying. The first time I told one of my pivotal moments in life, I was talking about how society doesn't allow alternative versions of grief. And when my husband passed away, I actually felt relief, but I couldn't share that. I couldn't express that, because society expected me to be the grieving widow. And I was, believe me, I was. And there was that element that had to be completely suppressed. Now, I was explaining this. I told my story for the first time at a networking meeting for women. I think it was the first time we were allowed out to play after lockdown. And I was talking about my story, and somebody came up afterwards and said to me, "Thank you for sharing that. You've just given me the courage I needed to walk away from my relationship with my husband, a toxic relationship with my husband." And I'm looking at her, doing the poker face, going, "How did you get that from what I just said?" The face did not show this, but I'm really pleased to hear that there's something in what I said has empowered you. What? Yeah. The thing is that people will get what they want out of, what they need out of any situation, if they are open to it. So I love the fact that you're sharing some of you're sharing your stories, which then give meat and flesh to the bones of the colouring, because it then gives me permission to sit back and go, okay, so Nicole was going through this. How does that mirror in my, and then gives me the permission to do that exploration for myself. So in advance, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for saying so. It's the way I sort of imagine it. And again, playful mind, right?
Mm.
Just sort of, but it's almost like, because when I was creating the drawings, I didn't feel like coloring them. You know, I have no desire to color them. I just really enjoyed making the black and white outlines. And it's like, this is my part of the journey, and these are my stories. But if we can imagine walking together beyond space and time, right, next to each other, where I bring this part, my stories and my black and white lines, and they bring their colors and their reflections in their own stories and their doodles and so forth, then it becomes a journey that we go on together, even if we're not in the same place at the same time. And the idea that these can create all these different journeys with all these different people who I don't even meet, but where we are connecting, right? We are connecting energetically in some way. And that each book will end up being completely different, because it'll have different colors, it'll have different doodles, it'll have different, reflections. I find that exciting. I find that, to be co-creating these books with other people.
And as you say, not even knowing who they are or where in the world they are, what their experiences of life has been, but you're doing it together from an energetic perspective.
Yeah, and it's just sort of like, why limit myself to think, oh, wait, but that's ridiculous, because, we're not, no, let's go there, let's explore that, let's see what happens. And that for me is the power of play. It's to allow yourself to see and imagine that there is more than what meets the eye. There's more, and we know this more and more. There's so many studies being done now where we really see how, from an energetic point of view, the impacts and so forth. And so I just find that very exciting. And even playing with the outside world, playing with the universe, playing with these energies, it's play. It is about saying, well, what if, what if in this world there is some kind of a response to my question, and it presents itself in the form of, something I least expect. And all of a sudden it shows up. Yeah. And all of a sudden you become sort of, you get that energy of the inner child, which, I love watching animals, show up, being in a place, and all of a sudden I'm sitting there and there's a crab that's walking between the rocks on, at the water, and I sort of look at it, I say, what have you got to teach me today? And I'll say, well, I am walking on these pointy things between rocks with waves coming up, and I've got this, I'm really not adapted to this environment, because then I fall between but I don't care. I'm just going to pick myself up, and I'm going to, and sometimes I'll just sit in the sun and be warmed up, and sometimes I'll get swept away, but that's okay, because I've got a shell, and I can go into these sort of interesting explorative stories. And it's like, thank you for showing up and giving me this message. It doesn't matter if it was meant to be. I decide that in that moment that was useful, and that's play.
And I love the fact that when I like going out in nature anyway. I confess I'm a fair weather walker. So at the moment when it's in down rain, I'm not regularly out there. But yesterday I had to go out, and we have a bird called a woolly wagtail here that is about yay big, and it's got a long tail, and it sweeps from side to side, hence its name. And they are feisty little fellas, and they will mob a crow in an attempt to lure them away from their nests. They are not known for being tame. I was sitting on a fence post, and as I'm heading towards you, I'm saying, excuse me, I'm just going to head past. It's all right, I'm not going to disturb you, but I'm just going to walk past. And he stayed there, and he looked at me, and he tracked me. Like, and then next thing I know, he's flown to the next post, and he's waiting for me to go past. Fly again. So I'm having these wonderful little conversations. And I mean, what was it? One year I was out in Sedona, and it was a big sign saying, bears seen on this track, beware. Now, I'm going out there on this bush trail. Nobody even knew where I was, which probably wasn't very sensible. So I'm marching down. Now, I've been told that bears, if you come across a bear, you make yourself as big as possible and as loud as possible. So I'm marching down this track going, hello, Mr. Bear, you don't want to see me and I don't want to see you. And then suddenly thinking, well, I hope there are no humans about either, because I think I completely lost it. The point was I didn't see anything. But even if I had, I don't know that I'd have been scared. I don't know. I'm faced with a grizzly. I don't know. Probably would have been. But I'd give out the energy of what I'm going to meet today.
Yeah.
What can I find out? What can I learn from my environment?
And the thing is that in that moment, you are really, in the moment, right? You are in that mindful moment. You are not, your mind is not sort of, oh, how is so-and-so going to react when I tell them this? Or, oh, you're not in the future, you're not in the past. You are here, you're there, you're now, you are calm, you're collected, you are, infused with what nature or whatever is going on around you. And all of a sudden, everything feels so nice and still.
Yes.
Right. And this is what we're, I think, really meant to experience when we're here, is that we see the moment when we live, we have the experience. We don't have the imaginary experience. Because, I always have to laugh, because when I talk about play and going into these imaginary worlds and just sort of saying, oh, what if, let's just explore this and that. To me, that is the real world. Mm-hmm. The imaginary world is the one that we think is real, the one that we live in. That's this construct of what we think, there are rules, and the rules of the game are we're just playing a game that we've lost interest in playing. That's not much fun to play, having to pretend this and that and adapt this and that and go for this and that and worry about the future and feel bad about the past. And for me, that's the imaginary world. That's the construct. That's the game.
Yes.
It's just not fun.
Don't like it.
So, we may as well choose a better game. Right? We may as well choose a game that we enjoy playing. The more we choose a game we enjoy playing that feels really aligned with ourselves, the more we are actually in a sense of reality, because this all of a sudden feels true. And the other stuff just feels like BS, because there is a lot of BS in that. It's old ways. There's a reason for it. There's a reason how it got to where, there's survival and fear and stuff, protect and all that. But it's an old game. We don't need to play that one. Yeah. We can move on to something better. And yeah. And so, we can create the game that we want, really. Once we become aware of the rules that we really want to apply.
Conversation, Nicole. We have had a lovely conversation prior to this, I may add. And yes, I'm sure we will again. So you've got this book coming out imminently, by the time this is published, out, and we will pop the links into the show notes. So we're saying that it's going out on Amazon and it's going out in physical bookstores as well.
It's going out on Barnes and Nobles. It'll be on the main, all the main sort of online stores. It's a print on demand book. So so far it's not planned to be in physical bookstores, but maybe at some point it will be.
Right.
For the moment, you can order it on the major online store.
Cool.
Online stores. Yeah.
And the plan is for it to be released globally.
Yeah.
Excellent. Because the conversation we had before we came on air, my preference is Audible first and foremost. Ain't gonna work. Kindle. No, that ain't gonna work. So we're talking about that physical, that kinesthetic, experiential interaction with the paper, aren't we?
Well, it's about, for me, it's a lot about reconnecting with the self, right? And for me, online and computerized and digital, it doesn't work for me. For me, connecting with the self is holding something physical in your hand, sitting under a tree with pencils, coloring pencils, pens, whatever, and using your hands, but not to type. It's like with journaling. We know the power of journaling. Journaling with a computer is not the same as journaling with your hand.
No, it's not.
There's a connection between the hand and the brain that goes beyond our, that short circuits the conscious mind. It's like, because when we're using our hand, we're using the right side of our brain. We're using the creative side of our brain. So the left side, the analytical side, says, oh, apparently we're doing creativity right now. So I'm just going to go for rest, right? I'm going to go lie down because I've been way too busy. So this is all of a sudden when we access not only the creativity that we have, but the subconscious mind. And this is where the answers come from. So for me, it is so important to allow that connection to happen, to facilitate that connection through the hand and the paper and the pencils. So that's also, and yes, it's kind of hard to color on screen. You can with it, but it's
not the same. It's not the same.
It's not the same.
The reason that I got into Kindle is because here am I in Australia. I had family, I still have family in the UK, and a 12-hour, make that 24-hour flight, in effect, you can get an awful lot of reading done. And books that heavy, that thick, way heavy.
Yeah.
Of course, it's all about the weight, which is why I got into Kindles, but, give me the opportunity to physically turn the page. And
No, it makes sense. But for me, this is not a reading book. This is you are the active player of the book.
Yeah.
I just create a framework, but it's an invitation to play. It's a space. It's a space. It's another.
It's the sandbox.
It's the sandbox like any other sandbox. If you're sitting in a room with me and we're doing, we're playing together, we're using, these other tools that I've got, then we're creating that space. But if you've got the book, well, that's another space. And it's about creating that space when you open those pages. So
just before we finish, a couple of things. One, do you have any particular favorite toys that you play with your clients?
Well, I do love cards, and I've created my own card deck, actually. Or I'm in the middle of creating my own card deck, which is an identity card deck, and it's about location. So we go into this imaginary world of locations in regards to identity. It's not about oracle cards or tarot cards. It's more alchemy cards and archetype cards, and so they're images, and they're just fun and interesting. And it's not so much about the toy itself, it's more about what you do with it. And and it's about, you can take any old object that you've got in front of you on your desk as you see it, and you say, okay, so this is going to be, let's make this my mom, and let's make this whatever, and you can start creating these stories and moving things around, and it's not about the toy itself. It's more about the game you play, and it's more about the mindset. And reaching the play mindset doesn't necessarily take massive imagination. It's even just a sensation. You can move into that place, without creating a imaginary world. And even that is already really, really useful.
Thank you. Thank you, because I know there will be some seriously left-brained linear thinkers watching this going, okay, and having a little bit of a mind as to where they're going with this. So that's why I I was asking just a little bit more on the how, because an awful lot of people do get stuck in the how. So thank you for sharing that. And I, for one, am looking forward to physically getting hold of my book and my colours and doing some doodling. Before we wrap up, as you know, I'm all about internal scripts and the importance, the power of the words that you say to yourself. Now, they can be limiting, they can be empowering. And we're focusing on the empowering ones, clearly. So is there an internal script that you run that you can share with our audience to send us off to go play?
I do. And it's a very, very easy one. As you know, and from the conversation we've had before, I'm also very much about the power and the energy of words and that inner script. And so now I try to listen to my own. Okay. And there's some words that I know for me are very heavy, like the word try. For me, try. When I tell myself, oh, you should try this. Already there's should and try, and but even just try is it's going to be difficult. I'll probably fail. It's going to be a long and cumbersome process. So when I catch myself being in that serious try mode or should mode, I say, no, play with it. Let's play with it. And just by using the word play, it shifts every, like I've got goosebumps right now just saying that, because all of a sudden I get excited and say, oh, well, if I'm playing with it, there are no expectations. I cannot fail. I'm exploring. So play with it. And all of a sudden there's this courage of the inner child that comes out. And it's about, I get back to that space where, okay, I'm just playing with it. Who cares how this turns out? And so this is what I mean by saying, we don't need objects, games. We can just remind ourselves to play with whatever it is that we're wanting to explore, but in a less serious manner. And then, funnily enough, we go a lot further rather than hold ourselves back.
Let's play with it. I love that. Thank you. Thank you so much. Nicole, I could talk to you for hours. And as I said earlier, we probably will reconnect anyway off the podcast. But thank you so much for sharing about your exploration without expectation. We will have Nicole's links in the notes. We will have a description and a definition of that wonderful word.
Cottywomple. Cottywomple.
Yes. Oh, love it, love it, love it. One is discombobulated by that, I have to tell you. And then we'll move on from there. So please do check out the links for Nicole's work. But as I said, by the time this actually goes live, the books will be online. So we will make sure that there's at least one Amazon link up on in the show notes as well. So thank you so much, Nicole. I have loved talking with you.
Thank you for having me.
For now, bye from us. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.